Hey guys, welcome back. And this one is part two of our optics series. And this one is specifically about magnifiers. So typically you're going to be using these magnifiers with a red dot holographic or some type of 1x prism. The 1x prism does get a little bit muddied, if you will. They're not all compatible with magnifiers. However, I think they make the most sense. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. So here we go. Magnifiers. Let's get into the pros and cons. So here are the pros. They're lightweight. Typically lightweight. Now, without the mount, you can save a little weight, but obviously you're gonna factor in the mount total. For example, this one right here, this is a Sig Sauer Juliet 3X Micro, and that one comes at 9.9 ounces. I do have a different mount on it, so this one is coming in at 9.1 ounces, but the optic itself with the mount is relatively lightweight. They are compact. Even the 4Xs and the 5Xs are only going to be a little bit longer than this. There are 6Xs, and those tend to be long. Now, this one in particular is a micro, and it seems like the industry is moving more towards the micro to give that smaller footprint. But there's some shortcomings that come along with the micro, and I'll talk about that also later, especially when we get into the cons. So they're relatively lightweight and they're compact. Typically, they're going to come with a QD mount. This one does have a QD mount, but this didn't come with it. The Juliet 4, which is the 4X, that one comes with this exact mount, but the micros do not. So that's an additional cost. But the majority of the magnifiers I see out there, they do come with a QD mount. So that provides you the ability to quickly attach and detach on the fly as you need. Magnifiers, you can get, so here's another pro. You can typically get budget ones that will do the job. This one in particular is kind of a budget one. I think I got this one on sale with a discount code, and it came out to about 190 before tax and shipping. But typically, you're going to see them around the 250 price range. Vortex and a couple other those primary arms are going to be around that 250 to maybe 300. But that's the budget side. Now you can get cheaper ones, but once you're going below the 200 price range for like an MSRP, you're really getting into probably bad glass. Now, this isn't great glass, but it's good enough to be able to identify and see out the distance somewhat. Again, I'll touch on this a little bit later. Another pro is these these magnifiers do provide a means to positively identify any potential threat or target out to distance, which is something that was a pretty big con for just the standard red dot holographic or the 1x prisms. And the last of the pros is they extend the usefulness of the red dot, the holographic, and the 1x prism. So, straightforward for the pros. That's quite a bit of pros when you're talking about the magnifier. So, yes, they're lightweight. Yes, they are compact, so you get a nice compact package overall. The QD attachment gives you the ability to attach and detach on the fly. They are robust, which is one that I overlooked. They are robust. The optic itself, they're battle proven. These micros, or not so much the micros, but the magnifiers are combat proven over, let's just say, 20 years now. and they hold up to the abuse quite well. Again, even on a budget level, you're getting adequate glass. It's going to get you out the distance and be plenty useful. You're going to have that ability to positively identify potential threats or targets out the distance, and it's extending your useful range, so you as the shooter are going to be a lot more accurate out to distance. Now here's the cons. They add additional weight. So obviously this is an addition to work alongside the red dot or the holographic or the prism, and that is adding weight. Now these may be relatively lightweight by themselves, but in conjunction with the red dot or whatever it is that you're running, you're almost doubling, if not more than doubling, the weight. So in that case, you're starting to get into LPVO territory. I'll touch more on that in a little bit. You have very, very short eye relief, especially on these micros. So you're getting a very short eye relief, and that can lead into length of pull issues. I have experienced this with these using the magnifiers, primarily these micros. You're, depending on the position you're shooting from, especially if you're upright or if you're in a seated position, you're gonna have to mess with your length of pull, either collapse your stock to get that really nice image. In the prone, not as bad. If you're working on a barricade and leaning in, not so bad because you're pushing your head forward because of your body position, but typically you're going to have to contend with some type of length of pull issue when it comes to these shorter magnifiers, these micros particularly, but that is something to consider. You have a fixed magnification only. So typically you're going to see 3x, 4x, 5x, or 6x. So 6x is not a whole lot common. It's out there, but not really utilized a whole lot. 5x is more than a 6x. 3 and 4x is what you're going to see the most, with the number one being primarily 3x is what you're going to see for magnifiers. So while you are getting magnification and you have the ability to swap from basically 1x to 3x, you're fixed at that 3x. So now while you're getting some advantages, you are being limited at the same time. Mounts are a potential failure point. They can fail. They have failed. And in this case, these mounts are hinges. This one is a force to overcome, so there's no lock like this one has. The original mount that came with it has this button you got to push, and that allows you to throw this mount over, and then when you want to bring it back into your line of sight, you got to squeeze that and then bring it down. So those are the two that you're going to see. But those mounts, because of the way they operate and its design, you have this hinge point that can be, and I don't know if this is going to show up, maybe right there. There's very little material on the outside here. You get a good enough hit on this, and it's either going to crack or it's going to break, bend, what have you, and now that magnifier has become a paperweight, and it's no longer useful. Now, you can still use it as a monocular on the fly, but as far as being weapon mounted, you've lost that capability. And lastly, they can be very expensive. So, those are the pros and cons. Let's get into some of the specifics of that, right? So, let's touch on adequate glass, right? So when you're talking about adequate glass, yes, you can see a target out the distance. Today I just went up to the range. I was shooting out to, it was a 600-yard range. Effectively, I was shooting out to 400 yards and making hits. 400 yards is doable, but you can see that With this particular glass, you were losing a lot of the finer details. Beyond that, it became very difficult. Even though they are plates, the plates are shot up pretty well. So you're not getting a whole lot of contrast between that and the backdrop. And this is something that you're going to run into should there ever be a scenario, because people are going to try to mask their position. And with the lower tier or the budget minded magnifiers, you're obviously stepping down in glass quality, which means it's not going to be as effective out to distance. But it's still usable. I was still making hits on 12-inch steel out to 400 yards. The weight portion. Now, this one's 9.1 ounces. This is 7.7 ounces. Now you're getting into LPVO territory. So let's talk about that, and I'll jump into the price along with it. So say you bought your first rifle, you made sure that you bought a quality AR, and now you want to invest the money into a red dot and magnifier because that's what you've decided on, and this is going to be your one and done gun. You don't plan on really buying anything else, maybe some fun toys, but you want to have one serious go to war kind of setup. So you decide you're going to go with, say, an 8-point comp M5, right? The comp M5 without a mount is $950. You may be able to find them cheaper used, but they are very expensive. And if you go new, you're pretty much spending $150. It's pretty much that price across the board. That is without a mount, so you have to factor in a mount. You don't want to go top of the line mount because you kind of want to save a little bit of money, but you don't want to cheap out as well. You find a mount, let's say Midwest Industries, a lower 1/3 mount. There you go. That's an additional $100. Now that comp M5 without a mount is 5.2 ounces. With the mount, you're adding an additional 3 ounces, right? That's not even including the magnifier. So now you jumping into the magnifier. You decide you want to stay with the same brand, 8-point. You don't want to get their lowest one, but you don't want to dump money into getting their best one. So you settle on the 3XP magnifier. That's $422. No mount included because their mounts are expensive. So you want to go a different route. You find the cheapest mount that you can get because there's not a whole lot available for those, especially none budget wise. So you end up finding an American Defense lower 1/3 30mm QD mount for that. That's an additional $190. Now you start talking about the weight. The 3X magnifiers, 7.2 ounces by itself. Then the mount, is adding an additional 4.8 ounces. Collectively, that system, that setup, is now 20.2 ounces. And you've spent $1,662. That's not including taxes, and that's not including shipping costs. Let's flip to the holographic side, right? So for the holographic side, most people are going to stick with EOTech. There are Vortex and whatnot, but EOTech is pretty much the main contender there with the holographics. So you settle on an EOTech EXPS 3-4 because you're going to be using a magnifier alongside. You select the 3-4 reticle so that you have some type of drop or some type of holding points for a drop. That's $749 right there with a weight of 11.2 ounces. You keep with the company, you get the EOTech, and you go with the EOTech G33 3X magnifier, which is the cheapest one of the three that they offer. That's $629 because you're obviously going to get it with the mount that comes along. You can get it without, but you're better off getting it with the mount. It's your cheapest option collectively. That's an additional $629, and now you're adding an additional 11.2 ounces onto that setup. So overall, combining those, you're at $1,378, not including tax and shipping, and then you're at 22.4 ounces for the total weight, entering into LPVO territory. So there's some upside to it in terms of the speed to jump from 1x to 4x, 1x to 3x, or whatever. and being able to remove that from the rifle system, and you can patrol or do whatever you want and keep that rifle lighter weight. However, you're still going to be carrying that weight because they're either going to have it in a pouch or in your pack or whatever the case may be. You might throw it in a cargo pocket so that hey, I'm starting to get into more open areas. Let me put this on the rifle so that I can scan for whatever I may need to scan for, or we're taking shots. I need to lay down some accurate shots. You want to get that magnification to give you an advantage. So that's LPVO territory, and it's going to be the same thing with the 1X prisms. The prisms are going to be more along 7.5 ounces for the 1X prisms typically. And now the nice thing about the prisms, if you find a prism that works well with the magnifier, you're getting an etched reticle with some type of BDC or some type of reticle that you can use for holds and drop out to distance. So it's going to be a cleaner image, a cleaner reticle. The issue that you have with magnifiers, especially for red dots, because of the way red dots work, they're not a clean circle. They're more like a tiny little tick mark. And when you put a magnifier on that, you tend to see that a lot, especially if you have to turn it down. And this is what I've noticed with this. When you put the magnifier on, it almost magnifies the intensity of the illumination, so you have to turn it down so it's not blooming out as much. And then when you do that, you're getting a tick mark. And speaking from experience, if you're not in that perfect eye relief, it muddies that image and that tick mark gets worse. So you can have issues with accuracy. So there are some things to consider. Now, where do I believe that a magnifier fits in? What would I use this personally for in a role? And this is my personal opinion. I have no real world experience. I've never been to war. I never used this setup in an actual combat scenario. So take what I say with a grain of salt. I'm just some guy on the internet that's giving you his opinion. But I have trained, I have shot with this setup and other setups that included magnifiers. What I believe this is a 300 yard and in setup. Now, yes, I said that I made shots out to 400 yards. Now, I was able to do it. It took me a little bit to figure out where I had to hold the dot, which I had to hold the dot almost, I want to say it was like maybe 18 inches above the plate at 400 yards to get a good shot, maybe 2 feet above the plate. But then again, at that distance, my visual wasn't the greatest, probably because of the glass quality. So would I take that shot? Probably not, unless I can see that individual has a rifle and they're, or some type of firearm and they're shooting in my direction. That would be the only case. And this is all theoretical, coming from a civilian standpoint and talking from a SHTF or some type of societal collapse, and you're doing what you got to do to protect your family, your home, your community, whatever the case may be. So this is all theoretical. This is 300 yards and in. At 300, I was able to hit an 8-inch plate consistently, no real problems, and I think that's the safe bet, 300 yards and in with a magnifier. The eye relief issue can be mitigated by some traditional magnifiers, not the micros. So with this micro, and I'll mount it here so you can see, this is pushed up right here, right in front of the charging handle. Some of the traditional ones, like say the 6-hour Juliet or the EOTech G33 or the 3XP magnifier from A-Point, they're going to offset back here. So now that eye relief issue is mitigated, especially the length of pull issue, because you're dropping it right into your line of sight, and you can get an easier an easier eye, not so much an easier eye relief, but you have an easier time finding that spot on the fly in different positions when you have the optic back here as opposed to here. And as far as I know, I don't think that there's offset mounts for these micros. I know that there's not for this 6 hour Juliet 3X micro, because the only other mount that there I could find for it was from SIG, and that was this QD mount. So those are some things to think about, some things that I presented. Obviously, the pros and the cons. You know, obviously, you're free to do what you want. Your environment, your living area, where you live, is going to dictate mainly which direction you go in terms of just having a red dot magnifier, a magnified prism, a scope, you know, LPVL, or you know, a higher magnification scope. Your intended role for that rifle, what you plan to use it on, or for rather, and where you live is all going to play into this. So this is just providing you some, trying to be objective as possible up until giving you my personal opinion, which is just an opinion. But you have options. These are some pros and cons for you to consider, and then you can go forward with any, you know, purchase that you plan on doing. So thanks for watching. If you made it this far, I appreciate it, and stick around because there's more to come with this series.